So for a long time, people have speculated, and for many years they've gotten it wrong, saying that Trump would have been richer if he had just invested his inheritance into the S&P 500 and not bothered with any of the real estate stuff that he's been up to for the last several decades. And for a long time, that wasn't true. He actually had outperformed the market. Debt and a couple of smart deals and a couple of lucky deals meant that he'd done better than the S&P 500. But all of that changed in the middle of the pandemic. So we currently estimate that Donald Trump is worth $2.5 billion. If he had done nothing other than just take his father's money and put it all in the S&P 500 and watch it grow for decades, he would now be worth about $2.9 billion. So he'd be $400 million richer than he is today. In order to know whether Trump has outperformed or underperformed the S&P 500 over his life, you have to be able to answer three questions. The first is, how much money did he receive from his father? The second is, when did he get that money? And the third is, what's he actually worth? And for a long time, no one could answer the first two of those questions. But a few years ago, we got that information answered in a story by the New York Times, where they explained that as of October 2nd, 2018, if Trump had invested his father's money into the S&P 500, he would have been worth $1.96 billion. What we can do is then take that number and then move it, as the S&P 500 has moved over time, and compare it to Trump's net worth. So we now have a day-by-day calculation that we can do saying, did Trump make more money making the investments that he made, or would he have been richer if he just sat back, lived a quiet life, and stuck it all in the S&P 500? So the real estate market has changed a lot during the pandemic, all across the country. And in most places, it's done pretty well. But one place that it hasn't done as well is in Manhattan, in New York City. And that's where Donald Trump's holdings are focused. So if you think about what he owns, a lot of office space in a big city, and also a lot of storefronts in a big city. People weren't going to those storefronts anymore. They were buying things on Amazon. That means that future tenants are going to be less likely to want to pay huge rents to the owner of that building, Donald Trump. For companies that are looking to lease office space, they might not need as much office space anymore. That means that they are going to be leasing less. It's just a supply and demand thing. Therefore, the office space that is currently built will be worth less. So both of those two factors have hurt Donald Trump's net worth during the pandemic. In addition to that, you also have residential real estate that he owns in New York City. And unlike a lot of other markets, New York City residential real estate hasn't held up nearly as well. Comparing Donald Trump's performance to the S&P 500 is admittedly a very nerdy thing to do. And it's just an academic exercise. You have to understand that by living the life that he did live, he not only got to have a lot of fun building a lot of buildings and having fun in Atlantic City, sometimes not so much fun in Atlantic City, doing all sorts of things, going on The Apprentice, buying yachts, buying the Plaza Hotel, all of this crazy stuff, all of which Donald Trump has loved. He's loved doing all these business ventures. He's loved being a famous person. There's no way that he would have been president if he hadn't done what he did, if he hadn't done all of those business ventures. If he had just stuck his inheritance into the S&P 500, sat back and done nothing, nobody would even know who Donald Trump is. Instead, what he's left with is this really exciting life, but ultimately he's $400 million poorer than he would be if he'd just taken it the easy way.